Bing did a bang bang, episode 6.
Boys, welcome. This is No Two Ways. Didn't we ever explain where the name comes from?
We didn't.
Do you want to take it away?
So no two ways. We have very controversial thoughts in today's society anyway on very hot topics at the moment. And we feel like people's freedom to express their opinions are really limited at the moment. So we want to open up different avenues and try and discuss things without people taking offense by it and provide a platform where people can share their opinions and without judgment or prejudice.
Yeah, it's really a play on the expression No Two Ways, which we're using ironically here because there are modern two ways on the idea or perspective we share.
But people are so fixed now on one way of doing things that they forget that there's always another way to view things. And
That's right. And we're trying a different approach today. We're going to go with one single topic. So there's a guy that we know, and he's talking about getting into working at a juvenile center.
So he was contemplating between being a prison guard and working at a juvenile center. This guy's come over. He's a first-generation immigrant, all right? He's come over to work in the UK. He's looking for the next step to kind of expand what he's currently working on and looking for something with a bit more opportunity, right? So he's gone into either exploring juvenile or prisons.
Can you see yourself working in none of those places?
One of my friends was a prison guard for a while. Personally, I think it'd be pretty rubbish. I don't know. Myself, personally, I could do it. I know that I could do it. Whether I would choose to do it is a different matter. I don't think anyone wakes up and says, well, I want to be a prison guard. What do you want to be? Prison guard.
Would I want to be a prison guard?
Mm.
It sounds like one of these jobs where you would learn a lot about yourself.
It's true. It's the same with any job, though, because it's something that you never want to do, and it would be tough. So whenever you do something that's challenging, you're always going to go out from it.
When you say tough there, right, that word sticks out to you because someone was talking to me the other day about they work in the book industry, and they were saying they're like a bookseller or something. And they're like, yeah, I'm in a very tough job, so it's very stressful. Now, I don't know the specifics of what that job entails, but it feels weird that the metric or the bar for what tough is has been so skinned up to having a regular desk job and just turning up to your office 9 to 5 days a week is now tough.
You know what? That is tough. Because I'll tell you why it's tough. We're not designed to sit in front of computers for 5 days a week. That's such an unnatural thing that's just spewed up over the last, 20, 30 years. That's as tough as anything. To restrain yourself, to numb yourself of the creativity that you've been able to otherwise freely express by working and getting caught up in the rat race. So it's tough in a different way. But the way I would view the prison guard role as being tough is by pushing yourself out of your comfort zone in the sense that you're going to be speaking to extremely challenging people.
Man, that's one thing that I kind of enjoy about it. It's because these are not, I wouldn't say normal, but these are people who are the fringes of society. Because if they were normal and could get on with it, they wouldn't be there.
Exactly.
But because of some kind of dysfunction in how they interact with people or their actions, they've ended up in this place. So you're basically constantly around people who love to test boundaries, who don't like rules, who maybe don't understand personal boundaries and space. So it just sounds like the perfect place to learn how to manage really difficult characters.
What would you say were some of the underlying qualities or upbringings that these people would have had? Because there is a lot of research to suggest that, for example, a single-parent household will lead to men being more involved in prison, violent crimes, everything like that. So there's a single-parent household argument, which is pretty strong. There's pretty compelling evidence to suggest that people do worse if they do not have a present father and a present mother in their upbringing. But what other kind of factors do you think would play?
Let's say if we wanted someone to have the highest chance of ending up in prison or in some kind of juvenile center, what kind of things would you put them through? So you named one there, which is single-parent household. Maybe other things would be no support when they needed it. They were constantly belittled, or they had their confidence. They thought life was unfair. They didn't have any social skills. All these things would probably amount to them thinking, all right, I'm now not getting what I want out of society, so I'm going to start breaking the rules. I'm going to just take whatever I feel I want or need, and I'm going to revolt. That'll be my thing.
So one of them that is phenomenal is gender. They're all men. A lot of them are men. In juvenile and prison.
What's the line thinking there? Like, I don't know the status, but it's got to be overwhelmingly the people who are incarcerated on there.
Yeah, 100%. There's if you look at like the victims of violent crime, unemployment, homelessness, a lot of it's men, and those questions that, regardless of whether you're in a single parent household or not, somebody described it as men being more like orchids when they're growing up, whereas women or girls are like dandelions. So dandelions can grow in pretty much any condition; they'll find a way through. Whereas men,
you're gonna have to elaborate on the letter.
so men need, or boys need, they're more sensitive growing up than girls are. Yeah, it takes them. They get more easily emotionally damaged as children than women do. Women have been shown to be more resilient in nature as children.
It's a weird one. One of the things we're talking about is how society doesn't support men in the same way, or maybe some of the expectations and societal conditioning works against men in a lot of ways that cause them to end up in these places. But then the other side of this I'm thinking is, what about temperament? What about biology and natural characteristics? So some of the stuff I've seen is like men are more risk takers, and that isn't necessarily to do with societal condition. I think that's more biological, right? Where you had a little bit more tolerance for doing risky things like breaking.
Even hormonal, man. Like, do you imagine the amount of boys that growing up, like how many of your mates and probably me and you have jumped off things and just been like, oh, I wonder what happens if I jump off there. We have way less inhibition.
I've got so many stories of injuring myself as a kid because I was just like, let's see what happens when you do this.
Don't get me wrong, boys and girls do that, but for some reason, boys are more inclined to just take that risk and kind of do dumb shit and push themselves to, risk takers, as you say, and that puts them in jeopardizing situations, right?
What that friend you were speaking to was saying was that the reason why these kids have ended up in juvenile centers is because they haven't had the discipline forced on them from an early age. Now, he was saying that as a child, he's not a UK native, but he was physically disciplined from his parents, right? And that, he was saying, had a direct impact on him avoiding getting out of line. And this is something you've been talking about, where we're like, maybe that's something to be reintroduced, right? Because kids now have no consequence of the things they do.
Where do you, if you've said everything that you can to a child to support them in the best way possible, I feel like they need to know that they can't cross a line by some way, shape, or form. And if you remove corporal punishment from that, then there is nowhere else to go unless you are a master communicator, unless you have an amazing way of portraying yourself and essentially manipulating people to control them and do as you wish through your language. But 99% of people can't do that with their children, which is a huge problem. I'd say I would argue that one of the biggest problems in today's society in the UK is discipline amongst youths.
Let's say you've got kids, right? Are you physically disciplined?
It depends.
Depends on what?
It would be a complete last resort, and it wouldn't come from a place of anger or frustration. It would come from a place of measured, do not fuck with me anymore. And that's it.
Because I think it's consequence, right? It's how do you teach children about consequence? Because right now, the vibe that we're getting is that kids don't feel like there are any consequences to anything. Like, because the law is shaped up in such a way where you can get away with it, whatever, as a kid, and there's basically no repercussion. And so as a parent, if you're like, hey, Jimmy, you better not step out of line again, the kid's probably like, well, what the fuck are you going to do? Like, if you touch me, I'm going to go to the police, I'm going to complain to teachers.
It's absolutely fearless. And it's because
you've taken the power away from parents. That's the ball.
Yeah, but there's just no discipline at all. And you've got to ask why that might be. Why are kids doing so much worse? They're not listening to people, which means they'll generally do worse in education. There's nothing to... I always think, whether you're a manager, whether you're managing a group of people, whether you're teaching a group of people, whether you're in whichever situation where you're in charge of a group of people, there needs to be respect, right? If you're in charge, there needs to be respect. In my experience, some of the worst managers I've had have tried to be friends with people. There's no boundary between,
the personal and professional side.
Exactly. And you need to have that as a parent, as a manager, as a teacher, everything. There needs to be that line saying, you do not fuck with me to this degree, or there's going to be consequence, at least through some serious form of communication.
With adults, it's easier though, right? Because you can lose your job, or you can lose access to certain privileges as an adult if you get incarcerated. But as a child, what consequences do you have?
Exactly. That's tough. I mean, if you look at education systems that are doing really, really well, like we draw a lot of from our education system from the Singaporean style of teaching, which is basically seeing things practically. So mathematics is one thing that we take from them. I can't remember the name exactly, but their ways of teaching are very different. If you look at the ways that we're teaching, we're trying to implement all of the strategies that they use, and we're doing that. We're getting much better in our way of teaching, but the problem is still underlying, that people aren't listening. You can teach them whatever they want, but if there's no respect, then nobody's going to listen to what people are telling you. So it's not the content, it's not probably not the way that we're delivering it either. It's an underlying problem with discipline in the UK.
But if you compare it to, let's say there's kids or families out there with really well-behaved, well-disciplined children who aren't using corporal punishment, what do they do differently?
I think it depends on the child a lot as well.
Mm.
We were talking about nature versus nurture earlier on. We touched on the fact that 95% of psychopaths have been through some seriously traumatic experience as a child. So we were arguing that, nurture is a huge, huge component. I would argue probably a little bit more than how you're naturally made up, but it's still got a role to play. Some kids are going to be little shits more than others. And for some children, like I was the worst out of my family, like by a country mile.
Those of us, yeah.
But my parents didn't do anything differently with me. They would have done, but not like drastically.
Mm.
And you got to ask yourself the question, like, why was I worse? It wasn't because I had different parents. It was just different. I wanted to push the boat out a little bit further. I wanted to dip my toe in the water and see what I could get away with more. I probably could have done with a beating or two.
Preach to that one.
But I think the real lessons that you learn, you've got to learn them yourself. No amount of beating, no amount of nurturing and education can teach you things that
But by the time you're ending up in a juvenile center, my interpretation of that is something is failing to already. Either your parents, either the structures or systems you've grown up in has not served you well enough that you've ended up. Like no 10-year-old, you can't say to a 10-year-old, but you really need to be a bit more self-reflective and aware about your actions. Like that kid doesn't know shit.
Children is obviously the exception. As an adult, you can take accountability for those things, but when you're a child, you've got to look elsewhere.
Because this is what I'm thinking.
Well, there's problems. Well,
there are parents and families who are raising well-mannered, confident, secure, well-behaved children. And what are they doing differently compared to the kids who are in the little juvenile centers?
Well, what makes the best kind of parent? Obviously, you've got that argument between chasing the carrot and like the stick in the carrot. The carrot always wins. It's been proven countless times that you've got to give positive reinforcement rather than negatively punishing people. That could be a sign.
This goes against your corporal punishment idea.
To an extent, right? So it's not, if you try the carrot in every way possible, then
you resort to the stick.
As a very last resort, which is why I was careful earlier when you asked me, like, would you
beat your kid?
Yeah, it would be a very last resort. I would try everything not to, but I think the threat of being physical, at least, is something that would really teach them a lesson and surprise them.
And you got to exercise your own judgment, right? Are you beating little Jimmy because he forgot to clean up after himself at the dinner table? Or are you maybe beating Jimmy to make sure he doesn't hang out with heroin addicts? But I think about, is the consequence proportionate to the risk? You've got
to 100% be more positive than negative in any relationship. If you're negative about everything all the time, whether it's trying to get somebody to do something, trying to like raise a child, build a friendship, manage people.
So even positivity is the key thing here.
Well, there's a quote I heard, which was, once I did bad, and that I heard ever. Twice I did good, but that I heard never. People like to remember the things that you've done badly and point them out. If you do good things, it's very rare that you'll get praised for them. Generally speaking, if you're doing exceptionally at your job, people will be like, kind of take it as an expected thing. If you do something bad, you won't hear the end of it. And that's a really powerful kind of phrase that I heard quite recently. But yeah, there's obviously a problem with discipline and juvenile, but
I'm really fascinated about with children in general, because I think it reveals a lot about how you interact with people. Because children are such a distilled form of interaction where you do something and it has usually a really immediate response because they're so malleable, right? You can see the changes in your approach and your feedback so quick. Whereas with adults, you sometimes have to hammer away at it for a long time before you think, all right, now it's working, now I'm getting the feedback. But with kids, and you can see that in how different you can raise a child just by changing your tone of words. Like you say, if you're a little more positive, negative, has such a big consequence on it.
It's using a lot of the skills that, you know, you can gain from like selling things.
Oh yeah, because I guess for the kid, you're basically selling everything all the time. Because
Sure.
most kids are, from what I've heard, are like, why do I have to do this? Like, can you tell me why? And I actually think about this a lot. I was like, if I had to explain the things that I do to a kid, would I just get annoyed and be like, oh, just cuss? Because that's a weak out. That doesn't justify properly. And I'll think, all right, if I can't justify to a child why I do or think something, it means I haven't really thought through why I'm doing it.
The best way you can possibly explain something is to dumb it down and break it down for a child to understand as well. Like, that's the best people with language will do that. Be able to. So this is why I think Brian Cox is a scientist. He's amazing. He can explain some of the most intricate theories and he could explain it in a way that a 5-year-old would understand, because he has no ego at all. That's partly good. But it's when you're trying to convince somebody to do something, I think so much of it is about your tone and deliverance. Donald Trump's a great example for this. Have you seen scripts of what he's saying? It's complete nonsense. Yet he will have thousands and thousands of people cheering after every sentence. Man, that guy's a genius. He is a genius. He's like not in all the bad ways, but he's like Hitler. Like, his public speaking capabilities were just out of this world.
That's true. Actually, I've never drawn the comparisons, but someone who's really charismatic, or I think maybe more enigmatic, because you don't really know what's going on. How is it doing this? How are so many people behind this? It does feel eerily similar to Adolf.
Yeah, like the guy's a genius. Not Adolf, but Trump.
But
what guys giving out, man? My man Hitler, he was he achieved a great deal. Whether it's
an interesting, wonderful mass genocide.
he accomplished great things.
Hey, listen, we all have different wires for success. Yours is curing millions of Jews.
Well, that was his goal. He did pretty well at what he set out to.
Measure on how successful he was in achieving his goal. The guy did well.
He was the best of what he did.
There was no one better.
There was no one better. I'm not even going to say anything else about that.
We're going to close on that, man, and try and bring it back to kids. But it's tricky, man, dealing with kids, because they don't have the same filters that adults do. They usually speak their mind. They don't understand boundaries, or because sometimes they'll say, "Oh, why is this woman fat?" or something.
Because they've not they've not yet fully learned compassion and like to care about people's feelings.
Positioning, right?
Exactly.
About things you can or can't say.
And girls are a lot more emotionally mature than boys in that sense from a young age.
You mean
they'll be more sensitive? Yeah. And boys will just say things how they are, like a lot of the time. But yeah, it's really, really interesting.
So it would be a cool exercise, I think, to actually go and work in one of these spaces, because children love to test boundaries. And I bet if you're in this juvenile center, it's not even normal kids, right? It's not everyday kids. It's more like kids who haven't normalized to everyday society. Man,
some of the kids that I used to teach, some of their stories were insane. There was this one kid, and I was pretty good with the naughty children, by the way. Like
in anything here.
Yeah, like I would get asked to go and like look after and get them to go.
How did you do it?
Started off, I tried to be everyone's friend. After about half a year, realized that is absolutely not the way. I turned into a proper dig. Like any new classes that I went into manage, I set the bar so high. I was like, right, no talking when I'm talking. I didn't try and be their friend whatsoever. Swearing is absolutely not happening. Like
how old was it?
Between year 7 and 11.
Which is
10 to 16.
Okay, so this is a volatile age.
Yeah. And basically, I set the bar so high that if I ever dropped from that bar, then it was more of like, okay, he's having a bit of fun. Whereas if you set the bar low and then try to rein it in, that's when the problems would come, because like, what the fuck's he doing? It was just like, they won't respect you unless you set the bar at a certain level. But there was this kid, and I couldn't control him whatsoever. And I was like, what is going on? I just used to kick him out. If people were not listening to me and people were disrupting the class, no one, you're out. Like, I'm not fucking about with that. We send him out all the time. I got pulled by the head of the year, and she said to me, like, you got to cut him some slack. You got to learn to, have him in the class. Like, he's going through some stuff. And I was like, I don't care. It's like, there's other kids trying to learn. I don't care. And he was like, I'm just going to tell you a bit about his backstory. So this kid, his stepdad died. Stepdad hung himself. No, his dad hung himself. And then his mum was left with 5 children, him being one of them. His mum married his stepdad, who then had a stroke. And his mum had to care for his stepdad because he was basically a vegetable. He couldn't do anything for himself. So these kids were just left to run free at home. After going through the trauma of losing a parent at a young age, their mother, who was their only parent, had to look after the stepdad all the time. And these kids did whatever the fuck they wanted. And they had no kind of boundaries at home. They were just too busy. They were completely deprived of attention as well. That was just one of the stories. Another one.
Did you change your approach with that kid after that?
It made me feel more empathetic towards him. It was difficult because I didn't. As soon as you start letting people take liberties, that's when it all crumbles down. So, not really. Didn't change my approach too much.
It's funny, like when you say that story about the kid, I have sympathy with the situation, and I'm gonna cut him some stuff, especially as a kid. But let's say it's 20 years from now, and that kid is still problematic. He's not got his life in card. There's still some issues. Maybe he's done some time, whatever. Are you still cutting him the same amount of slack?
If I was to cut him slack in the classroom, what do you think that's going to do for him moving forward? It's going to be like, because of these things that are happening, I'm going to be able to do more, and I'm going to have more leeway. The best thing that I could have done, which is not what I was thinking at the time, would have been to just treat him like everyone else, been as firm as I could with him, because he's probably missing that more than anything else. So it's tricky. Like, it goes back to what we've spoken about so many times, which is excuses. And of course, this child's had a really, really tricky thing, but the more you play into that, the more he's going to think that he's going to be able to do things without consequences. And that's not the case, even if you have gone through some horrible times. If you've got ADHD or you've got depression, you've got mental illness, essentially it sucks that you're going through that time, but nobody's going to be able to make exceptions for you because of those things. You're going to have to learn to overcome them and think about ways that you can improve regardless of these conditions that you may have.
Man, that's a tough message to give a kid, right? To say, sure, I get you're in that terrible circumstance, but stuff it up. You get your shit together. Like, I don't know about you to deliver that message.
No, it would be, you'd feel like a complete dick. But then if you're in a relationship with somebody and you want to portray a message and you think that there's a really important, difficult conversation to have, the best thing to do is always have it.
But hey, we're now talking about the capacity for someone to understand and receive that message. As an adult, I'll give you complete sincerity every time and tell you straight the things that you need to hear. But as a child, I'm like, if I tell this kid exactly how it is, can he actually understand what I'm saying? Does he understand the responsibility, the magnitude of the situation?
Which is why communication is so important. Every parent needs to be great at communicating things. There's going to be a perfect way to frame that, the way in which you educate that child and the way in which you teach them the lessons that they need to learn. But what is that? I don't know. You don't know. Like, how would you approach that situation? How you approach that situation is going to be pivotal to his life.
It's a tough one, man. Because, sure, it sucks the kid is going through that. But if you take like what you said, you take the same approach to that kid as all the other kids who are going through that. What if that's too harsh? What if the kid, say Jimmy, is like, I'm not receptive for this information because I'm dealing with so much garbage right now. I can't understand what you're saying because, my home life is a wreck below it. So your message isn't coming through.
What's the best way to go about it then?
Well, this is what I'm asking. Like, you've got the experience with kids. I'm thinking, how do you get those messages across to someone who's not in a state to receive it?
I think, in my experience, the more you play into these situations and the more leeway you give them, the more it excuses their bad behavior, even regardless of the things that they're going through. The harder you come down on them, 9 times out of 10, there's obviously a boundary. You're not going to insult like what he's going through and fail to understand that he's going through a really tough time. But you also can't forgive behavior as a result of that, regardless of what he's going through. Because as soon as you start to forgive that, he's going to think it's acceptable and continue to do it.
Because that's the current narrative, right? It's been stretched to the point where, excuse this person because they have this condition, they're going through this. And it's not just children, right? It's adults, maybe in the workplace, maybe in relationships, like, this person, excuse their behavior, like, oh, don't mind this person because they've got this condition, or they're going through this hard time, they've just been let go of their job, whatever it is. And everything feels like an excuse where you're like, you no longer have to meet the normal standards of everyday society and normal interactions because you now have this crutch on what you go. But it's a tough one. It's like, are you going to hold people to an impeccable standard all day, every day, regardless of what they're going through?
But it goes about changing and surrounding yourself by, they kind of go hand in hand with, you've got to put yourself in uncomfortable situations and keep the bar at a certain standard for yourself to grow. It's going to be hard, even if you're going through something, but you don't move the bar lower because you're going through something. You've got to keep the bar where it is. And even though it's going to be 10 times as hard because of the things you're going through, over time, if you hold yourself accountable to those standards and other people do as well, you'll be able to get there
to that level.
But as soon as you start lowering the bar of expectations and standards, then you start dipping.
It's a tough one. I'll definitely use this kind of way of thinking for myself, but for other people, it's a tough one because I realize not everyone has the same crazy standards and expectations in themselves.
But everybody, look at everybody.
Look at them. Look at what a mess everyone is.
Matt, why is that?
And, well, there's so many
standards, expectations. They don't hold themselves accountable to certain standards.
Man, the natural conclusion of this way of thinking is that nobody deserves any rewrite ever. If I'm ill, bucket, no excuse. If I just lost my job, if I broke my ankle, fucking no excuse. No matter what happens, I never waver, I never compromise on my rules and standards.
Maybe.
That is subconsciously.
I can't pick it apart at the moment. Thinking about it, as soon as you start to reduce those standards and give yourself leeway, then it can create a negative snowball in my eyes. It would not do anything positive. And even though immediately you'll feel comfortable, in the long run, it's only going to send you one way. I think I'm about to start sweating to the point where I'm not going to be able to continue, but it was a great episode. So thanks for tuning in again, guys. We'll see you.
Peace.
See you next week.